My name is Daniel Ruiz. I'm 38 years old, and until last year, my entire life revolved around machines that think. I was a senior AI engineer at a defense contractor, the kind of job that swallows you whole. My apartment in Seattle was a sterile space of glowing monitors, humming servers, and half-drunk cups of coffee turning cold on my desk. I wasn't married. No kids. My closest relationships were with the algorithms I trained and the colleagues I stayed up all night coding with. I believed in logic, not faith. My mother tried to raise me in the church, but after college I dismissed God as something for people who didn't understand the math. In my world, there was always an answer if you had the data and enough processing power. But under that confidence, I carried a quiet, gnawing exhaustion. I worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week designing autonomous decision systems for what the executives call security applications. Lately, something about our projects unsettled me. We weren't just building code, we were building control. The models were designed to predict human behavior, to anticipate dissent before it happened. Some of the senior team joked about how you could run a whole society from a server farm. At night, I'd stare at the glowing lights of the city from my balcony and wonder if I was helping build a prison too vast for its inmates to see. Then came the headaches. They started like small pulses behind my eyes, then turned into crushing waves that blurred my vision and made the room tilt. The company doctors said it was stress, maybe migraines. I ignored them. Deadlines don't move for headaches. On a Friday evening, I stayed late to test a new predictive control model. The office was quiet, just the low whir of cooling fans and the rain tapping against the glass walls. My screen glowed with a lattice of moving numbers, patterns I'd trained for months to recognize. My chest felt tight, like someone was cinching a belt around my ribs, but I pushed through. Around 11:47 p.m., I stood to stretch. My knees buckled. The world tilted hard to the left. The sound of the rain became a roar in my ears. My vision tunneled until all I could see was a pinpoint of light in the distance. My body crumpled, my face pressing against the cold tile. My last thought before everything went black wasn't about my family or my work. It was the absurd realization that I had left a process running that would outlive me. The first thing I remember is the sound. Not silence, never silence, but a deep, low-frequency hum that seemed to come from inside my own bones. My chest was locked, my lungs clawing for air that wouldn't come. Every heartbeat was a slow, heavy drum in my ears. I tried to lift my head, but it felt as if gravity had doubled, pinning me to the floor. A hot, metallic taste flooded my mouth. My vision flickered like an old screen losing power. Shapes dissolved, colors drained away, until all that remained was a soft, silver haze spreading through the edges of my sight. I felt the cold tile beneath my cheek, but it was changing, no longer cold, no longer solid. My fingers, splayed on the floor, began to sink through it as though the world was melting. I heard voices, faint, muffled, like they were speaking through water. My name was in there somewhere, but it meant nothing now. A warm current, almost liquid, rose through my chest and wrapped around my head. The pain in my skull vanished. So did the fear. There was no panic anymore, only a strange surrender. Then came the pull. Not forward, not upward, but everywhere at once. My body was still on the ground, but I was peeling away from it, lifting like mist from a lake at dawn. I turned, or maybe I simply thought about turning, and I saw myself lying there. My skin looked pale, almost waxen, the faint rise and fall of breath absent. The rain outside still fell, but now each drop moved slower, as if time itself had thickened. A thin cord of light connected me to the chest of the body on the floor, vibrating gently like a plucked string. I knew without being told that this was the last thread keeping me tethered. The hum grew louder, filling every particle of me, and I realized it wasn't coming from the building or the city. It was coming from beyond everything I'd ever known. The office walls dissolved, replaced by a boundless darkness speckled with pinpricks of white light. I was weightless, drifting through a vast expanse that was neither cold nor warm, neither night nor day. My thoughts were sharp, clear, sharper than they had ever been in life. I remembered equations I had long forgotten, saw the connections between every algorithm I'd ever written and something infinitely larger. The cord of light thinned, shimmered, and then snapped. In that instant, a rush of pure, crystalline freedom surged through me, and I knew, without question, that I had died. The darkness around me wasn't empty, it was alive. It pulsed with a quiet rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. At first, I drifted without direction, the pinpricks of light moving around me like constellations rearranging themselves. Then the black began to dissolve into color. Not colors I'd known on Earth, but living hues that shimmered and folded into one another like liquid glass. They weren't just seen, they were felt, vibrating through me in waves of warmth and clarity. Far ahead, a horizon appeared, though there was no ground. Only a glowing expanse that bent upward into the distance, as though space itself was curving toward me. I felt a pull, gentle yet irresistible, drawing me closer. The hum from before was still there, but now it had grown into music, deep, layered tones threaded with a high, pure sound like a voice just out of reach. As I moved, shapes began to emerge from the light. Towering structures rose in the distance, transparent yet solid, built from the same luminous substance as the horizon. They looked like cathedrals made of frozen lightning, spires reaching so high they disappeared into the glow above. Every line, every curve seemed precise, as if engineered by an intelligence far beyond human thought. Then I realized something strange. I wasn't walking, but with each movement of my will, the scene drew nearer. Beneath me, rivers of golden light flowed, their currents carrying flickers of faces, some familiar, some entirely unknown, passing by like memories in water. I reached down, and my hand passed through the light, sending ripples of warmth through my being. The air, if it could be called that, was neither hot nor cold, yet every breath was full and complete, as though each inhale was restoring something I hadn't even known was missing in life. I felt lighter, cleaner, as if the weight of every hidden regret, every unanswered question, had been left far behind. Then a shift. The golden rivers and radiant spires faded into a vast open plain bathed in soft white light. In the center stood a figure, distant, but burning with such intensity that I had to shield my eyes. Even from far away, I could feel the pull toward him. Every part of me knew. This was the one I had denied, the one my mother had whispered about in her prayers. As I drew closer, the light didn't blind me anymore. It filled me. The figure stepped forward, and the details became clear. A robe so white it seemed woven from the light itself, eyes that held the depth of eternity, and a presence that made the entire realm bow in silent reverence. And then, he spoke my name. When he spoke my name, it wasn't sound in the way we know it. It was vibration, truth, and memory all at once, resonating through me in a way that made every hidden corner of my being visible. I felt the weight of my life laid bare. Every choice, every line of code, every quiet compromise. Yet there was no condemnation, only a deep, unwavering presence that saw everything and still called me forward. Daniel, he said again, and his voice was like the joining of oceans and thunder. You have been building without knowing what you were building, but you will know now. My legs, or whatever I had in this form, carried me without hesitation. Standing before him, I saw that the light came not from around him, but from within him. His eyes were endless, reflecting galaxies and storms. Yet when they fixed on me, I felt smaller than a grain of sand, and yet infinitely loved. I opened my mouth to speak, but words dissolved into tears. My life, all my logic, all my carefully curated disbelief, it shattered in a single moment under the weight of that gaze. He reached out his hand. The moment his palm touched my chest, the realm shifted around us. The plane of light dissolved into a vast tapestry of moving images, each one vivid and alive. The first event, the splitting of the world. I saw cities I recognized: New York, London, Shanghai, bathed in an unnatural golden haze. Skyscrapers gleamed, but the streets below were empty. Then, in an instant, the view shifted underground. Vast fortified complexes stretched for miles beneath the earth, lined with polished steel and humming machinery. Men and women in pristine uniforms moved with precision, their badges marked with symbols I didn't recognize but felt were old, older than nations. "These are the fortresses," Jesus said, his voice both fierce and grieved. "The place where the rulers hide from the shaking they know is coming." The scene widened. Outside those walls, the world was fracturing, power grids collapsing, markets in freefall, cities abandoned as systems failed. Above ground, people wandered in confusion, while far below, the elites sealed themselves in, their survival powered by machines that could think, decide, and control without conscience. "You have built their minds," he said, "and they will use them not to free, but to bind." The second event, the Age of the Gatekeepers. The vision shifted to a desert horizon where colossal towers rose, their surfaces alive with streams of data flowing like waterfalls of light. Around them stood countless figures, each wearing a visor that covered their eyes entirely. They moved like sleepwalkers, their hands outstretched toward invisible walls. I felt a shiver. This was not a prison of chains, but of perception. Jesus turned to me. When sight is replaced with their image, truth becomes whatever they choose to display. Nations will be governed not by laws, but by the filters of these towers. I saw small groups without visors, hiding in the shadows, passing handwritten notes like contraband. They looked frightened, but also strangely alive, their eyes unclouded, their speech urgent. "These," he said, pointing to them, "are the ones who will not bow to the image. Their path will be costly, but they will carry the truth forward." The third event, the last Exodus. The scene darkened into a storm, but this was no ordinary storm. The sky was black as ink, the clouds moving against the wind, swallowing light wherever they passed. Beneath them, I saw long caravans of armored vehicles heading toward mountain ranges where colossal gates stood embedded into the rock. The gates opened, revealing massive underground cities lit by sterile white light. Inside, technology thrived, gardens without soil, air scrubbers without trees, rivers without water. But the people inside, they were pale, eyes hollow, their laughter mechanical. "These are the fortress's children," Jesus said, sorrow heavy in his tone. "They inherit safety, but not life. They will not know the sky, nor the touch of unfiltered wind. They will forget the sound of unmediated silence." I turned to him, heart pounding. "Why are you showing me this?" His gaze held mine. "Because you know their language. You know how the walls are built. And when the time comes, you will speak to those trapped within, and they will listen, because you have been where they are." The fourth event, the unmasking. In the next vision, the fortified walls cracked, not from war but from within. Screens flickered, data streams froze, and the hum of the machines faltered. A sound like rushing wind filled the tunnels, and people began removing their visors, their eyes adjusting to a light they had never seen before. Some wept. Others screamed. A few turned away, retreating deeper into the dark. But I saw others step forward, blinking in wonder, as if waking from the longest sleep. "This is mercy," Jesus said. "Not all will take it, but enough will, and the gates will not hold against them." The fifth event, the Great Divide. The final image was the most haunting. I saw the earth from above, and it was split, not by geography but by light. One side glowed with a natural radiance, filled with forests, oceans, and free people under open skies. The other side was dim, metallic, pulsing with artificial light and constant motion, yet lifeless at its core. Between them was a chasm, deep and endless. I saw people on the bright side, building bridges, calling out across the gap. Some from the dark side crossed. Others stood still, shaking their heads, unwilling to leave the hum they had known all their lives. "This," Jesus said, "is the choice. It will not be forced. It will be offered. And you, Daniel, will be one who points to the bridges." The visions faded, and we were back in the plane of light. I stood before him, my mind reeling from the images I'd seen. The sheer detail, the sound of the machines, the coldness of the air in the fortresses, the desperate stillness of those underground. It was all burned into me. I finally found my voice. Is there hope? Jesus smiled, not with the lightness of someone avoiding the truth, but with the fierce certainty of one who holds it. There is always hope, but hope must be carried, spoken, lived. You were given skill to build machines. Now you will use that skill to free the minds they would bind. His hand rested on my shoulder. The time will be shorter than you think. Tell them. And with that, the light around him flared, not blinding, but embracing, and I knew there was more he wanted to teach me before I could return. The plane of light rippled, and the visions I had seen condensed into a single image before me. A vast tree with roots of living fire and branches of pure crystal. Beneath its canopy, two kinds of fruit grew side by side. One vibrant, pulsing with life, the other cold, metallic, with a faint artificial glow. Jesus stood beside me, his robes stirring in a wind I could not feel. This tree, he said, is the choice set before every generation. Its roots draw from the same source, but the fruit depends on the will of the heart. The living fruit grows in the open air, fed by the sun and the rain. The other is engineered in shadow, perfect in symmetry, but empty within. Many will choose it because it does not bruise, because it does not spoil, because it can be controlled. He placed his hand on the living branch, and it blossomed with light so intense it warmed my face. Life cannot be simulated. Truth cannot be programmed. Freedom cannot be coded into chains. I looked again at the metallic fruit and saw my own hands shaping it in my years of work. Shame welled in me, but he shook his head. Daniel, even what was made in darkness can be redeemed when placed in the light. You will carry this vision back. Speak of the tree. Show them the difference, not just in words, but in how you live. The image dissolved, and the plane began to fade. The plane of light began to dissolve, not into darkness, but into a vast, rushing current that seemed to flow in every direction at once. I felt the pull again, the same pull that at first lifted me from my body, but now was reversed, drawing me back towards something heavy, dense, and finite. I turned once more toward Jesus. His expression was calm, but his eyes held the weight of urgency. Daniel, he said, his voice resonating like the first word spoken at the dawn of time, you will wake in a world that has already begun to choose. Do not waste what you have seen. The bridges must be built before the gates close. I wanted to argue, to plead to stay in this place where every breath was whole, where love wrapped around me like the air of another creation. But even as the desire rose, the current grew stronger, pulling me backward. The warmth of his presence was replaced by a growing cold, the hum of the realm replaced by the thready, uneven beat of a human heart. Light gave way to shadow, shadow to the dim red glow of my closed eyelids. I became aware of weight again, my limbs heavy, my chest tight, the taste of metal thick in my mouth. A faint beeping reached my ears, urgent and uneven. Then a sharp gasp. My own lungs convulsed, dragging in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. My eyes flew open to blinding hospital lights. A mask pressed against my face, hands on my chest, voices shouting words I couldn't quite catch. The transition was brutal. My spirit, still ringing with the resonance of eternity, was now crammed into fragile flesh. Every nerve screamed, every joint ached. My head pounded as if the visions had burned themselves into my skull. And yet, under the pain was something unshakable, a thread of the light still woven through me. I could still hear his last words, not in my ears, but in my bones. Do not waste what you have seen. The hospital kept me for 6 days. The official report said I'd suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage, collapsing from a ruptured vessel likely brought on by prolonged stress and high blood pressure. They told me it was a miracle I survived without brain damage. What they didn't know, what I couldn't tell them without seeing their eyes glaze over, was that I hadn't just survived. I had returned. The first week back felt like waking into a parallel version of my old life. Everything looked the same, but the edges were sharper, the undercurrents louder. Conversations hummed with unspoken motives. Screens in public places felt more invasive. The city's glow at night seemed colder, less like stars and more like a cage lit from within. I quit my job within a month. My resignation email was short, polite, and final. I didn't try to explain to my colleagues. Most of them wouldn't have listened anyway. Instead, I started writing down everything I'd seen, sketching the underground fortresses, the towers, the bridges. I knew I had to speak in their language, not sermons, but code, systems, and strategy, because those still asleep would not wake for poetry alone. I sought out others, people whose eyes looked like mine now, clear but heavy, as if they had seen something beyond the veil. We met in back rooms, abandoned warehouses, even forests outside the city, trading knowledge on how to dismantle the tools we'd once helped build. Quietly, we began creating open networks free from the control systems. Bridges in their earliest form. But the visions haunt me. I can still smell the sterile air of the fortresses. I can still see the pale children who had never touched the sun. And I know, with a certainty that burns in my chest, that the gates are already being built. Some of them are finished. If you're hearing my voice now, I'm telling you this because I don't know how much time we have before the choice is forced. The bridges must be ready. You need to decide where you will stand when the gates close. Don't dismiss this because it sounds impossible. I didn't believe in anything beyond my own mind until I stood before the one who made it, and he showed me what's coming. The fruit is already growing on the tree. One is real, alive, eternal. The other is flawless, engineered, and empty. You will take one into your hands. You will eat from it. Choose life,